welcome back. The federal government is planning to sell or concession all the hydropower plants across the country. And also there are more than 25 projects that will be turned into active assets that will be generating money in some ways to the federal government. Some of them will be offered to investors for equity, while others will be totally sold to reduce waste. All this is to fund the 10.7 trillion naira deficit on the 2023 budget. To help us understand how this could work, we have Mr. Paul Alaji, senior economist and partner, SPM Professionals, joining us from our Abuja studio. Good morning, Mr. Alaji. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good morning, and thank you so very much for having me.
Yeah, so thank God you're an economist. Some Nigerians have heard of this, and they've been afraid that isn't this chipping off our national image? If you talk about some of those national assets, the National Theatre, you know, and things like that seem to represent Nigeria, the brand and all of that, and it being sold or concession. Isn't it chipping off our national image?
Sales of assets is neither good nor bad. It depends on the process, what you are selling, and what you do with the proceeds if eventually argument favors sales. So for some of the asset government have mentioned, those that will be listed, that government will divest, and some that government will sell completely, we need to look at each of them. What is the performance of these assets? For instance, government is hoping by next year, because of PIA, the sales or partial sales of NNPC or making NLPC be going to the stocks so that people can buy, those that have interest can buy shares in NNPC. And if you ask me what has been the performance of NNPC in terms of revenue, one of the ministers had mentioned recently that even though NNPC claimed that he has declared profit in recent years, what has not happened in decades, but they are still looking for the money. And as I speak with you, for more than 6 months to be charitable, but in the real sense, more than 9 months, NNPC has not sent money to FAC account to be shared by different tiers of government. Do we then say that NNPC is profitable? I think as somebody who may want to consider it from business perspective, I would say I'm not very sure. If NNPC spends so much money, still in charge of 4 refineries, that we continue to spend billions of naira to maintain, but we are not even refining up to 1 liter of petrol to ease the pressure that surfaced in Lagos this morning, and what has been in Abuja for a number of weeks now. And it may make some sense to say to give NNPC to private sector to manage without government intervention. But that does not mean government interest in NNPC should reduce to 0. I think government should still have some interest, but to have 100% interest in NNPC, I don't think is very correct. We also have thousands, tens of thousands of assets that are dead, that are not completed, that government cannot manage, such as hotels and so on and so forth, from Bayelsa to Lagos to Kano to Calabar to different parts of Nigeria that government has abandoned over the years. This could be given to those that can help with employment, help with revenue generation, to go to the hand of those that can manage it. Then we can have some level of not just revenue in this budget 2023, but to also have economic re-engineering and economic activation. I heard Minister of Finance had said, Minister of Finance Incorporated. We now come back to mainstream to help government in terms of management of government assets. That is what government investment. That is a welcome idea. But the question now is, what are we going to do with the monies? I give you an instance when government came up a number of years back and said we want to sell PHCN. The question is, do we have more light? Can we say that we have really seen a lot of improvement or same level of improvement in terms of power generation? And this remains one of the fears in the minds of Nigeria. I tell you what happened. Now, when that was sold, significant amount, if not all, the amount was used to pay labor. That is, those that were working at PHCN in form of pension or gratitude, I beg your pardon, gratuity, I beg your pardon, those that were working at that time without any investment going directly into PHCN. And that caused for a lot of worry, because those that took over the business with the expectation they have that if they pay XYZ amount to government will have some part of the money invested into the business. But that is not what we saw. Eventually, they went to central bank to collect loans. Today, we all can bear the witness, and those that are watching us now and those that will watch in future, they could tell whether there has been an improvement in power generation or power distribution, I beg your pardon, in their homes. And this is a big reality government should watch. So beyond putting some of the assets for sale, so there are some assets that government may also want to sell that if they're already performing, I don't think it would be a good idea for government to say they want to sell an asset that is performing. So we need to look critically into the asset, what we want to sell, also the method of valuation. Saudi Arabia put the government enterprise into the market and generated over $25 billion. That was a bit higher than what Alibaba was valued at, and it became a big investment for government. Now, what will Nigeria sell if we sell most of these assets today only on 2023 budget? Recall that the deficit in 2023 budget is more than 50%. This year, 2022, what we expected as deficit is only 7 trillion. It has increased by almost 3 trillion. What will be the increase when the next person gets to office and we are still faced with economic quagmire, we are still faced with high inflation, we are still faced with poor exchange rates, we are still faced with a number of issues in our economy? All right, Mr. Laje, I certainly reinvest this back into the economy. I
certainly feel your passion, and I'm glad you brought up that issue with NEPA, PHCN, because I mean we're living with it. And the question you ask, I think, is rhetoric, because you're in your home, we're in Nigeria, we know what's going on with power supply and all that. And, very salient issues you've brought up there about the modality of it, how it is done. Is it transparent? Is it being sold to the people who should get it? What happens to the revenue? What happens if the next administration comes and we're still seeing the austere situation that we have at this time? What else would they sell? So obviously, these are very hard questions that would need to be faced. But what should Nigerians be doing now? Because yes, we read the news and we see the federal government is planning this. How many people can go to Aso Rock and say, no, government, you can't, we don't want you to sell this, or we want to see the process, we want to be sure? What should Nigerians be doing now? What can we do, as Nigerians at this time, following the views you have listed?
Well, I think Nigeria should continue to ask questions, and I have seen that media is really helpful this time. Engaging more, asking questions. Whether we like it or not, government is listening. They may not act, but the truth is that government is listening. We're in a political season, and how you know government is listening is that all the things that have been said, you now see people in opposition at the local government, at state government, and at federal level, bringing those things that have been said, the things that have been done by media, print media, and radio, television. They are bringing it as point where they want to see a difference in how their lives are managed. So that's on one hand. Two, regarding the question I asked, there could actually be an answer regarding what are we going to do, because when you look at 2023 budget, only 5 trillion naira of the budget will go into capital expenditure. So when you borrow approximately 10.7 trillion naira and you are only going to spend half of that in capital expenditure, the question is, where will the remaining half go into? It's going to be on recurrent, or you are going to use it to service that, because now we have changed the template for budgeting into recurrent service and non-service. So you are going to spend half of asset sales or borrowings into. I don't think that is a right approach. I also don't think it's sustainable, and that's how we got ourselves in 40 trillion naira debt. How are we going to pay back? So to answer your question directly, Nigeria should ask questions. And I also think that media houses, which of course several media houses have been doing, and I think you need to be more potent in doing this, call government officials to be more responsible by having maybe interview, town hall meetings, and ask these questions, because this is the best Nigeria can do. And of course, on election day, the power that Nigeria has is to go out to vote and to show whether they are happy with policy of government in their state, in their local government, and of course, at federal level. So that is what Nigerians can do. And I also think Nigeria should continue doing those.
Also be the cost of governance. You've alluded to it, how much will be used on personnel. So cutting the cost of governance may also be one other way to reduce the pressure that leads to this need of selling of assets.
Well, I don't think there's a better way to say it. Cost of governance is definitely impacting our economy negatively. And I can tell you that even if you borrow at 1% for 5 trillion naira, you know what the implications will be. More so that our external debt have started to gallop. And a number of persons have asked, is it not better to borrow externally? You are going to have money flow into the foreign reserve, which is what we should applaud. You get money in your foreign reserve, it gives you some level of balance, but how sustainable is it? Were you going to borrow next month or 2 months' time? So people have given good quality argument for external borrowing. But this remains my argument. When you borrow externally and you devalue your currency, which as an economy we have been susceptible to in the last 30 years, what will happen is that all the monies we borrowed would increase. And I can give you an instance. February 2021, Central Bank of Nigeria emaciated, that's a technical word, say devalued naira. 1 trillion naira was posted by another agency of government called the Debt Management Office as additional debt that Nigeria now has. We did not borrow new money just because that policy of devaluation was made, which central bank cannot do anything about because central bank don't spend the dollar the last time I checked.
All right, Mr. Alhaji. Well, certainly, as you said earlier, Nigerians would have to consider these, as the election gets close. And you also challenge the media. We take that challenge, hoping that the government officials will respond, when we call, because some of them we do call, we don't get response. You send messages, they don't respond, so sometimes the media is stuck in between. We want to carry on the conversation, but if you carry it on without the government, is seen as one-sided. But we will continue pushing, Mr. Alhaji. Thank you so much for that. And of course, we're going to engage people like you also to join us in this conversation and responsibility in the nearest future. Thank you for your time this morning, Mr. Alhaji.
Thank you so very much for having me.